The sound of her voice cut through the quiet like glass breaking. "Next time, knock before you come into our bedroom. You're just the nanny, not family." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My hands were still halfway through folding a baby blanket, soft white cotton trembling between my fingers. I turned, slow, careful, so she wouldn't see how my jaw had locked. Tasia stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, perfume sharp as her tone. She wore one of those silk robes that shimmer when the light hits, the kind of thing that says money even when her words don't. Behind her, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, warming the marble floor I'd been polishing since sunrise. It should have been a pretty scene, morning light, a calm house, but her eyes made it cold. I managed a small nod. "Yes, ma'am." She looked me up and down like she was checking for dust. "Marcus doesn't like people going through his closet either. I've already told the staff that." The staff. Funny how words can bruise. I'd been in that house 3 weeks, long enough to learn who belonged and who didn't. The gardener nodded at me kindly. The driver always said good morning. But Tasia? Every glance was a reminder that my place was small. Before I could say another word, Marcus walked in. My heart stuttered the way it always did when I saw him, half pride, half ache. Time had changed him. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing success like a well-tailored suit. But his eyes were the same. Those soft brown eyes I'd wiped tears from when he was 5 years old and scared of thunderstorms. "Morning," he said, setting down his briefcase. "Everything all right?" Tasia slid closer to him, voice suddenly sweet. "It will be, once everyone remembers boundaries." Marcus frowned, then looked at me. For half a heartbeat, something passed between us. Recognition, maybe guilt, but he masked it quick. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it," he said quietly. Tasia laughed, light but sharp. "Oh, I'm sure she didn't. She's harmless." Harmless. I felt that word land right under my ribs. I wanted to speak, to tell her who I really was, how many nights I'd rocked that same man to sleep, how many times I'd kissed scraped knees and prayed for him. But my tongue felt heavy, tied by years of knowing when silence was safer. So I just said, "I'll finish in the nursery, ma'am." Tasia smiled like she'd won something. "Good idea." I left them standing there in that perfect bedroom, perfume and polished wood and everything shining. My chest burned, but my steps stayed steady. The nursery smelled of powder and new beginnings. Little shoes lined the shelf, too tiny to hold all the dreams waiting for them. I sat in the rocking chair and let the quiet hum of the house settle around me. I told myself not to cry, but memory has a way of sneaking up when you least want it. I saw him then, Marcus at 3 years old, sitting on the kitchen counter of his parents' house, legs swinging, face sticky with peach jam. "Miss May," he'd giggled, "you put too much sugar." That boy's laughter used to fill every corner of my life. I wiped my eyes and whispered to the empty room, "Lord, why you bring me back here just to test my patience?" Because it had to be him, I thought. No one else could have tied my life in such a knot, working for the wife of the very child I once raised. The circle felt cruel and strange, like life was playing a joke too old to laugh at. Later that morning, Tasia's voice echoed down the hall again. "Ora Mae, bring the diaper bag when you come downstairs, and be careful with the bottles. They're imported." "Yes, ma'am." I packed the bag, gentle as glass, checking the labels twice. When I reached the kitchen, Marcus was already by the door, keys in hand. Their baby, little Noah, slept in his carrier, cheeks round and peaceful. He looked just like Marcus did at that age, same dimple, same stubborn curl over the forehead. Seeing him made my heart twist in the sweetest, sharpest way. Tasia slid on her sunglasses. "We'll be gone for a few hours. Try to keep busy." "I'll manage," I said. She gave me a thin smile and walked out. Marcus followed, but before he stepped through the door, he looked back. For just a second, his eyes softened. "Take care of yourself, miss." He caught himself, like the name he used to call me almost slipped out. Ora Mae. That tiny pause was enough to send a whole wave of memories crashing through me. When the door shut, the silence felt too loud. I leaned against the counter and breathed deep. Every corner of that house whispered pieces of the past, lemon polish, linen curtains, faint piano music from somewhere upstairs. It wasn't my home, but the air carried ghosts I knew. That evening, when they returned, the baby fussed. I hurried over, humming low until he settled. Tatia watched, arms folded. "He seems to like you," she said, sounding more suspicious than pleased. "Babies can feel when somebody loves them," I answered before thinking. Her brows lifted. "And what makes you so sure you love him?" I smiled gently. "Because he reminds me of someone I once took care of." Marcus froze. The baby's tiny hand gripped my finger, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped spinning. Tatia's voice sliced through the stillness. "You talk like you've worked for half of Atlanta's families." "Just one that mattered," I said quietly. Her lips tightened. "Well, don't get too attached. We like to keep things professional around here." "Professional?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'd heard that word before from Marcus's mama years ago when she'd handed me my final paycheck. "You've done your part, Ora Mae. Time to move on." But hearts don't move on as easy as boxes. After they went upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the old photograph I kept tucked in my wallet. It was worn from years of folding, a boy about 10, smiling with missing teeth, his arms slung around my neck. I traced the edges with my thumb, whispering his name like a prayer. "Marcus Jerome Williams, you done grew into a fine man, but Lord, I wish you hadn't forgotten where you came from." The next morning, things turned colder. Tatia started leaving sticky notes on the counter, tiny criticisms dressed as instructions. "Use less bleach. Don't touch the good towels. Keep quiet when guests are here." I read them all, one by one, until the paper pile felt like pebbles in my chest. But I kept my head down. I needed the money, yes, but more than that, I needed to understand why fate had led me back to this boy's life. Maybe God wanted me to witness something. Maybe he wanted me to forgive. That Friday, Tatia called out while I was dusting the piano. "Ora Mae, where did you learn to hum like that? It sounds old." I smiled without turning. Probably because it is. My mama used to sing it while she ironed. "Well, maybe stick to the radio," she said, pouring coffee into a gold-rimmed cup. "The house feels a bit too plantation when you do that." Her laugh tinkled, light as glass. She didn't even notice the way Marcus's head snapped up from his laptop. His eyes met mine for half a second, apology flashing there, but he said nothing. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I steadied my voice. "Yes, ma'am." Moments later, she added, "Don't take it personal. I just prefer a modern vibe." Modern. That word meant erase what makes you you. I swallowed hard and kept dusting. By evening, my patience was stretched thin as thread. I told myself one more day, maybe two, and I'd quit. But when I tucked Noah into his crib and saw that small hand clutch the blanket, my heart softened again. Leaving felt impossible. Later, as I was heading out, Marcus stopped me near the door. "Ora Mae," he said softly. "Thank you for helping today." I nodded. "That baby's a blessing. You take care of him." He hesitated, then said, You remind me of someone from when I was little. She used to say that same thing." I smiled faintly. Maybe I do. He looked like he wanted to ask more, but Tatia called from upstairs, and the moment broke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment on the edge of town, listening to rain hit the window. My mind replayed every word, every look. Maybe I'd been foolish to come back to this world. Maybe people like me were meant to love in silence and let memory be the only reward. But deep down, I knew something bigger was turning. Fate wasn't done weaving yet. And sure enough, the next morning, while I was putting away folded laundry, Tatia stepped into the room, holding a photograph I'd forgotten on the counter. "Who's this boy?" she asked, brows arched. I turned and saw Marcus's 10-year-old smile staring back from that old picture. My mouth went dry. Just someone I used to look after. He looks familiar. Her tone sharpened. Where did you get this? Long time ago, I said softly. Before she could speak again, Marcus appeared in the doorway. His eyes fell on the photo, and all the color drained from his face. Marcus froze like the floor had turned to ice beneath him. Tacia glanced between us. You two know each other? He swallowed hard, his eyes flicking from me to that photo still trembling in her hand. Where did you find that? On the counter, she said. She said it's someone she used to look after. But Marcus, that boy, he looks just like you. Silence pressed around us. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock counting every second of truth trying to escape. Marcus took a breath, the kind that starts a confession. But I shook my head, slow, just enough for him to see. It wasn't time, not yet. Tacia waited, impatience painted all over her face. Well, Marcus forced a small laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Old picture, Tay. Probably reminds her of someone else. I watched his hand slide into his pocket, curling into a fist. The lie tasted bitter even from across the room. Tacia tilted her head, lips curling. Strange coincidence, don't you think? Maybe, I said quietly, reaching out my hand. May I have it back, ma'am? She hesitated before placing it in my palm. The paper felt warm, almost alive. I tucked it away and offered the smallest smile. Thank you. Then she turned, her heels clicking like punctuation marks as she walked away. When she was gone, Marcus exhaled so deep his shoulders dropped. Miss, he caught himself again. Ora Mae. Is that picture really? I nodded once. It's you, baby. His eyes glossed over, confusion and shame fighting for room. I thought I dreamed you. You didn't, I whispered. But you forgot me, and maybe that's worse. He looked down, jaw tight. I never forgot. I just never told her. Why? He shook his head, whispering, because I didn't think she'd understand. The ache in his voice pulled every memory out of me, his small arms around my neck, his sleepy voice calling from down the hall. Miss May, don't leave the light off. I wanted to reach for him now, to hold that grown man the way I used to hold that child, but something told me to wait. A truth like ours needed the right time to breathe. That night, the house felt heavier. Tacia barely spoke at dinner, her gaze sharp, her smile too tight. I could tell she was thinking, turning the photo over in her mind. After the dishes were done, I slipped into the nursery. The baby stirred, tiny fists curling in his sleep. I brushed his cheek with my finger. You got his eyes, I whispered. Don't ever let the world make you ashamed of where you came from. When I turned around, Marcus was standing in the doorway. His tie was loosened, his expression soft. You still talk to babies like they can answer. Sometimes they do, I said, smiling. Not with words, but with peace. He stepped closer. You saved me once. I tilted my head. Saved you from what? Loneliness, he said simply. My parents were never home. You were the only one who saw me. His voice cracked, and for a second, I saw that little boy again. The one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder, the one who would ask if God had favorites. Maybe God's favorite people are the ones who keep loving even when no one sees them, I said softly. He nodded, eyes glistening. Then that's you, Ora Mae. I smiled, but my heart broke a little, because I knew tomorrow everything would change. The next morning, Tacia came down the stairs dressed in cream silk and suspicion. Marcus, she called, can I speak to you a moment? He followed her into the study. I stayed in the hallway, not meaning to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the door like whispers meant for me. Why didn't you tell me your nanny was still alive, she said. I didn't think it mattered. It matters if she's here, in my house. Your house? His tone hardened. Ours. I heard her scoff. You know what I mean? I just don't like surprises. He sighed. She needed work. I figured helping her would. Helping her, she snapped. She should be retired, not roaming around here acting like she belongs. That word again, belongs. I pressed my hand to the wall to steady myself. Marcus's voice dropped low. She does belong. You wouldn't even have a husband to argue with if it weren't for her." A long silence followed. Then I heard the slap of a cup hitting the desk. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said, voice trembling, "she raised me when no one else did. She's the reason I became anything at all." My heart thudded. I didn't want him to defend me. I just wanted peace. But sometimes the truth forces its way out, no matter who's ready. The door opened suddenly. Tacia stood there, face pale, eyes burning. "Is that true?" I met her gaze. "Yes, ma'am. I was his nanny when he was a boy." She stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "All this time." Marcus rubbed his temples. "I should have told you." Her eyes darted between us. "You lied to me, Marcus. You let me treat her like—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Oh my God." I stepped forward, gentle. "You didn't know. Let's leave it at that." But she couldn't let it go. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because sometimes saying who you are too soon only makes folks lock their hearts tighter," I said. "I wanted you to see me before you saw my story." Her lip trembled, pride fighting shame. Before she could finish, the baby cried upstairs, thin and sudden. The sound broke whatever spell held us there. "I'll get him," I said. She didn't stop me. When I reached the crib, Noah's tiny face was crumpled with tears. I lifted him, rocking slow, humming that same old song. "Hush now, sugar. The world's loud, but Grandma's song still works, doesn't it?" Behind me, footsteps. I turned, and Tacia stood in the doorway, arms folded but eyes softening. "That song," she whispered. "Marcus hums it sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep." I smiled faintly. He learned it from me. Her gaze fell to the baby. "You must think I'm awful." I shook my head. "I think you're young and proud. Both can make a heart blind." She blinked fast, then walked over, running a finger along Noah's tiny arm. "He really looks like Marcus, doesn't he?" "Every bit of him." For a moment, we both just watched the baby breathe, small chest rising and falling. Something unspoken hung between us, something fragile and waiting. Then she whispered, "He told me you were fired when he went to boarding school, that his parents didn't even let him say goodbye." I nodded. "That's true." Her voice cracked. "That must have hurt." "It did," I said. "But children remember love longer than goodbyes. He found me again without even knowing it." Tacia bit her lip. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied gently. "Sometimes silence says more." I laid the baby back down, his tiny fist clutching the blanket. When I turned to leave, she touched my arm, light, hesitant. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw not a cold woman, but a scared one. Someone who didn't know how to be tender without losing face. "Apologies are like seeds," I said quietly. "They only grow if you water them." Her eyes glistened. "Maybe I'll try." Downstairs, Marcus waited, pacing. When Tacia and I came down together, his shoulders eased a little. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "It will be." He looked at me. Gratitude flickered behind his eyes, wordless but loud enough for my heart to hear. I gathered my things to leave, the photo tucked safe in my pocket again. The evening light poured through the tall windows, turning everything gold. For the first time since I'd stepped into that house, it felt warm. At the door, Tacia said softly, "Thank you for taking care of him, then and now." I smiled. "Some loves don't expire, ma'am. They just change their shape." She didn't answer, but her eyes followed me until the door closed behind. Outside, the sky was the color of honey, soft and forgiving. I stood on the porch a moment, breathing it in. My hands still trembled, but this time it wasn't from anger. It was from relief. Because I knew what tomorrow would bring. Not peace yet, life never gives that easy, but something close enough to reach for. And deep down, I could feel the story tightening, ready to unfold. Because the woman who once called me just a nanny was about to learn exactly who I really was. The next morning I walked home slow, letting the soft gray light of dawn carry me. The street smelled like wet pavement and coffee grounds. My shoes whispered over the sidewalk, and every step felt like closing a door I hadn't meant to open. It wasn't anger sitting in my chest, more like the heavy ache of a wound that hadn't healed right. Tasha's face kept flashing in my mind, the shock, the guilt, and Marcus's voice trembled somewhere underneath it. I'd seen too many truths land between married people like a hammer and a crack in glass. But this one felt different. It was old. It had waited years to be spoken. I passed the bus stop and kept walking, just to let the memory breathe. The early light caught on the windows of a bakery across the street, and the smell of warm bread drifted out. For a second, it took me back. Funny how memory sneaks up when you least expect it. 1 minute you're walking through present day, the next you're 20 years younger, wearing your best dress for a job you're praying to get. I remember that morning clear as yesterday. The year was 1998, late spring, heat already pushing through the air like a warning. I'd just buried my husband 2 months before. The house we'd shared was too quiet, the bills too loud. My neighbor, Miss Ruth, had told me about a family out in Buckhead, looking for a live-in nanny. Good pay, clean people, she said. They just had a baby boy. I ironed my only crisp blouse the night before, prayed over it like it might hold me together. When I got there, the house looked like something out of a movie. Big porch, white columns, roses that smelled too rich to touch. I hesitated at the gate, wondering what kind of life could fit behind all that beauty. A tall woman in pearls answered the door. Mrs. Jerome. Every inch of her looked polished, from the French twist in her hair to the diamond winking on her finger. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Ora Mae," she said. "Do come in." Inside, the floors gleamed like glass. I could see my reflection in them, and it made me nervous. She led me through a hall lined with family portraits, all of them perfect, no smiles too big, no hair out of place. "We're looking for someone dependable," she said, her heels tapping fast. "Marcus is almost 2, and with my husband's travel schedule, I need an extra pair of hands." "I understand, ma'am." She looked me over. "Have you worked for families before?" "Yes, ma'am. I helped raise my sister's 4 children. I also worked with the Coles family for 3 years. She nodded, not looking at me but at the paperwork in her hand. "We'll try a week. If it works, we'll talk about staying longer." Then she turned and called up the stairs. "Beverly, bring Marcus down." A few seconds later, a young woman came down, holding a small boy, round cheeks, big brown eyes, curls that bounced with every step. He couldn't have been more than 20 months old. The moment I saw him, something in my heart shifted. He looked right at me, no shyness at all, and reached out his hand. "Hi," he said, soft but clear. I smiled, took his tiny hand in mine. "Hi yourself, baby." Mrs. Jerome watched, a little surprised. "He doesn't usually warm up to strangers." "Guess I ain't a stranger then," I said, and the boy giggled. That laugh, it wrapped around me like sunlight. I didn't know it yet, but that sound would fill the next 12 years of my life. The first few weeks were learning curves and late nights. Marcus had energy like lightning. He'd run circles around the kitchen, hide behind the curtains, climb onto chairs he had no business climbing. I learned quick that his mama loved order, his daddy loved distance, and the boy was caught somewhere in between. Most mornings, Mr. Jerome left before sunrise, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. His cologne lingered long after he'd gone, but his voice hardly did. Mrs. Jerome spent her days organizing charity galas, rarely home before supper. That left me and Marcus, 2 souls holding up a house too big for either of us. At first, I kept things proper. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, nap time sharp at 1. But it's hard to keep your heart behind rules when a child trusts you completely. Marcus started calling me Miss May by the end of the 2nd week. I tried to correct him once. "Ora Mae's fine, baby," but he shook his head. "No, you Miss May, you mine." And just like that There's a rhythm that forms between a caretaker and a child, an invisible language. I'd hum while I cooked, and he'd hum along between mouthfuls of mashed peas. I'd tell him stories from back home, and he'd ask for the same ones every night, especially the one about the old oak tree that whispered secrets. The house staff changed often, but we stayed. I watched him learn his letters, his colors, his fears. I taught him how to tie his shoes, how to pray before bed, how to say thank you, even when the world forgot to be kind. Sometimes Mrs. Jerome would peek into the nursery, arms crossed, watching us from the doorway. "You spoil him," she'd say with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "I just love him," I'd answer. She'd nod, half approving, half jealous of something she couldn't name. Time has a way of folding in on itself when you live your life around someone else's heartbeat. Days turned into months, months into years, and soon that house on Pemberton Lane felt more mine than any place I'd ever rented. Marcus grew taller, talkative, curious about everything. Every morning he'd climb onto the kitchen stool while I cooked grits and eggs. "Miss May," he'd ask, "why the moon follows the car at night?" Or, "Do angels get tired?" I'd answer best I could. "The moon follows you, baby, 'cause it likes the way you dream," I'd say, and he'd grin like that made all the sense in the world. When he turned 6, his daddy bought him a small red bike. He didn't teach him how to ride it, though. That fell to me. We'd go out to the driveway, me holding the seat while he wobbled forward, my heart jumping every time he leaned too far. "Don't let go yet," he'd yell. "I won't," I'd promise. But I always had to, sooner or later. That's how people learn balance. Mrs. Jerome's parties filled the house most weekends. Glittering women, polished men, music that sounded expensive. I'd keep Marcus upstairs, reading picture books until the noise faded into a low hum. He'd press his ear to the floorboards to hear the laughter below. "Do they like each other?" he once asked. I thought about the fake smiles and stiff hugs. "They like being seen," I said, and he frowned like that was a puzzle too big for him. There were nights I'd hear Mr. and Mrs. Jerome arguing behind the study door, money, travel, reputation, grown folk storms that had nothing to do with love. I'd hum louder in the nursery to drown it out, rock Marcus until he stopped flinching at the shouting. When he was 8, Mrs. Jerome hired a piano teacher. Marcus hated the lessons at first. Too many rules, not enough music. But one rainy afternoon, after the teacher left, he sat down alone and started tapping out the tune I used to hum while cooking. The notes came slow, uneven, then steadier. I stood in the doorway, apron still on, tears stinging. He looked up shyly. "It sounds better when you hum with it." That song became ours. Every Christmas he'd play it for me, every birthday breakfast too. It was the sound of everything good we built in that cold house. But nothing stays untouched forever. The year he turned 12, Mrs. Jerome began talking about preparing him for the future. Fancy school brochures covered the dining table, all brick buildings and smiling boys in blazers. I could feel distance creeping in like a draft under the door. One night she said, "He's too attached to you, Ora Mae. He needs discipline." I kept my voice even. "He needs love, ma'am. The rest will follow." Her eyes narrowed. Don't mistake affection for authority. I wanted to tell her those words didn't sound like a mother's, but I bit my tongue. You don't argue with the hand that signs your pay. That same week, Mr. Jerome left for another business trip and never really came back, not the way he should have. Papers arrived later, divorce, property, custody. The house felt emptier than ever. Mrs. Jerome began drinking her dinners. Marcus started asking harder questions. "Why don't grown-ups keep promises?" "Sometimes they make promises too big for their hearts," I said. He leaned against me, quiet. "You won't leave, right?" I smiled through the ache. "Not until you're ready, baby." But readiness comes faster for the rich. A few months later, the letter arrived, acceptance to a private academy 3 states away. Mrs. Jerome told me over breakfast like she was announcing the weather. "It's for his own good," she said. "You'll help him pack." The world went blurry for a second. I nodded, because that's what dignity does. When pain knocks, it nods. The night before he left, Marcus refused to sleep. We sat on the edge of his bed, surrounded by half-zipped bags. "I don't want to go without you," he whispered. I brushed his hair back. "You gotta go learn what the world looks like. I'll be right here in your heart, same as always." He hugged me so tight, I felt the beat of his little heart against my ribs. Promise? Promise. Morning came too fast. Mrs. Jerome honked from the driveway, impatient. I walked him out, rain falling soft and steady. He turned halfway down the steps, eyes wide with panic. Miss May! I waved, smiling the kind of smile that hides tears. Go on, baby. The moon's still watching you. The car door shut, tires hissed on wet concrete, and just like that, the laughter that had filled my days drove off into the rain. For a long while after, I couldn't step inside the nursery without feeling that emptiness sitting beside me. When the call finally came, a year later, Mrs. Jerome moving north, no need for staff, I packed my memories into 2 cardboard boxes and left the big house shining and hollow behind me. I thought that chapter was done, but life, it seems, was only turning the page slow, saving the rest of the story for another day. That Friday night, I ironed the tablecloth 3 times, just the way Tayshia liked it. She said we were having guests, Marcus's colleagues, a few wives, a promise of laughter and fine wine. I could already feel the air stretching too tight for comfort. The scent of roasted chicken filled the kitchen, candles already lit in the dining room. Marcus came down first, tie straight, eyes weary. You don't have to stay late, he told me. I smiled. You know I don't like leaving a table half set. He nodded, quiet, and went to greet the guests at the door. I heard the sound of heels, voices polished smooth with money. Tayshia's laughter floated above it all, bright, practiced, not quite real. When everyone settled, I moved between kitchen and dining room like I'd done 1,000 times before. Passing plates, pouring water, smiling when someone said the food smelled heavenly. They barely noticed me, which was fine. Sometimes invisibility is a shield. But I kept catching bits of their talk. Tayshia bragging about Marcus's promotion, about their house in Brookhaven, about how staff makes everything easier when you have a child. The word staff hit my ear like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Marcus just sat there, his smile pulled too thin. Every so often his eyes drifted to me, like he was checking if I was real or just memory wearing an apron. Dessert came, laughter louder now, wine deep in their voices. Then one of the guests, a woman with a red silk scarf, leaned toward Tayshia and said, Your nanny's remarkable. The baby seems to adore her. Tayshia's smile flickered. Yes, well, she's been with us a while. Older help, you know how that is. My hands froze around the serving tray. I felt Marcus watching me, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between us. Pain, gratitude, fear. The woman laughed softly. Older or not, she's got the kind of gentleness you can't train. Tayshia took another sip of wine. She's sentimental, I'll give her that. Sometimes a bit too familiar. The table chuckled, small polite laughs. Marcus set down his fork. Tay, he said softly. That's enough. Her brows lifted. What? I'm just saying. Don't, he said, firmer now. The room went still. Someone cleared their throat, trying to rescue the mood, but it was already gone. Tayshia gave a small laugh. Marcus, please, everyone's joking. No one's laughing, he said. I kept my eyes on the tray, trying to breathe slow, but the silence started pulling at me, heavy, hungry. Finally, Tayshia turned to me, her smile brittle. Ora Mae, I hope you know I'm teasing. Marcus gets protective about the strangest things. I met her eyes, calm. I know when words are kind and when they ain't. A murmur moved around the table. Marcus stood up suddenly, the chair legs scraping loud. All right, he said, voice shaking. That's enough pretending. Tayshia blinked. Marcus. He ran a hand through his hair. You talk about her like she's nothing, like she's invisible, but you don't even know who you're talking to. Her face went blank. What are you doing? She's not just the nanny, he said. She's the reason I'm even here to have this dinner. No one spoke. The candles hissed quietly in their glass cups. Tayshia's voice came out small, cold. What are you talking about? He turned toward me then, eyes glassy. Tell them, Ora Mae. Tell them who you are. I wanted to disappear. but there comes a point when silence turns into a lie. I set the tray down and folded my hands. I was Marcus's nanny when he was a child, back before you met him, back before he learned to hide where he came from. The red scarf woman whispered, "Oh my God!" Tasia laughed once, high and sharp, disbelief cutting through it. "That's impossible. His nanny, she'd be... Me?" I said simply. "I raised him, fed him, taught him to tie his shoes, say his prayers. I was there when he broke his arm falling from the cherry tree. I was there when his parents split. I was the one who packed his bags for boarding school while he cried." Marcus sat down again, voice trembling. "I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. I was ashamed of how she was treated, and ashamed I never went back for her." Tasia stared at him like he'd turned into a stranger. "You lied to me, for years." "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Her voice cracked on that last word. The guests were already shifting, pretending to check their phones, pretending they weren't witnessing a life split open. I wanted to end it right there, to ease the hurt spilling over the table. "Child," I said softly. "He didn't mean harm." But Tashia's eyes were shining with tears she refused to let fall. "And you? Why didn't you say anything? You watched me order you around like a stranger." "I was a stranger," I said. "You needed help and I needed work, that was all." She shook her head. "No, you knew exactly who I was. You knew I'd find out and you let me make a fool of myself." "I wasn't trying to shame you," I whispered. "I just wanted peace." Her chair scraped back. "Well, congratulations. You've ruined dinner instead." She turned and walked out, heels sharp against the tile, leaving silence thick as smoke. The guests mumbled excuses and left one by one. When the door finally clicked shut, only me and Marcus remained. He sat there with his face in his hands, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "Some truths wait till we're strong enough to tell them. Looks like tonight was your turn." He looked up, eyes wet. "I thought I could build a new life and leave the old one behind." "Baby," I said, "the old life's what taught you how to love. Don't ever be ashamed of that." He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that comes from breaking open. Upstairs, I could hear the faint creak of floorboards, Tasia pacing, crying maybe, trying to stitch her pride back together. I didn't blame her. Truth hurts worst when it's right. Marcus stood and hugged me then, just once, quick and trembling. "I missed you," he whispered. "I know," I said. "You found me anyway." When he let go, I saw something change in his eyes, boy and man finally meeting each other halfway. I started gathering plates, the small, ordinary motions that keep grief from swallowing a room. He tried to help, but I waved him off. "Go on, talk to your wife. I'll clean up." He hesitated, then nodded and headed upstairs. I heard the soft murmur of voices, a door closing gently, the quiet after a storm that isn't quite peace yet, but close enough to breathe in. I stacked the dishes, washed the glasses, wiped the tablecloth. The candlelight flickered low, reflecting in the window like tiny ghosts. When everything was still again, I sat for a minute and whispered to myself, "Lord, let this truth build, not break." I didn't leave that night. Something in the air told me my work wasn't done yet. The house had gone too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums under your skin. I sat by the kitchen window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the moon slide through the clouds. Somewhere above, I heard a door creak, footsteps pacing, then stop. A while later, Marcus came down the stairs, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up. He looked older than he had at dinner, tired in the way that truth makes you. "She won't talk to me," he said softly. "She's thinking," I told him. "Let her mind catch up with her heart." He sat across from me at the table. The same table where, hours ago, all that laughter had turned to ash. "I didn't mean for it to come out like that," he whispered. "Truth don't always ask permission," I said. "Sometimes it just walks in, sits down, and makes itself known." He stared at his hands. "I thought if I kept the past separate, I could be someone new, someone clean. I shook my head. Baby, you can shine up gold all you want, but it's still gold because of what it came through, not what it hides. He looked at me, tears pooling. You always talked like that, like everything made sense when you said it. That's because I learned early, if you can name a hurt out loud, it stops owning you. He nodded, then rubbed his eyes. I don't know how to fix this. Start small, I said. A soft word goes further than a loud one. Go tell her what you told me, that you were scared. He breathed deep and stood. You'll still be here? I'll be here. He went back upstairs, and I stayed in that quiet kitchen, tracing circles on the rim of my cup. Minutes passed like hours. Every creak of the ceiling felt like a heartbeat, every sigh like a prayer. Finally, I heard it, a door opening again, slow this time. Light footsteps coming down the stairs. I turned, expecting Marcus, but it was Tasha. Her face was pale, mascara smudged, a silk robe pulled tight around her. Couldn't sleep? I asked gently. She shook her head, eyes glassy. He's trying to explain, but her voice broke. I don't know how to look at him the same way. Maybe don't try to, I said. Sometimes you gotta see somebody new to love 'em better. She sank into the chair opposite me. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore, just heavy with the things she didn't know how to say. I was so rude to you, she whispered. I treated you like furniture. You treated me how the world taught you to treat women who serve, I said softly. That lesson runs deep. I've lived it long enough not to take it personal. Her chin trembled. But I did take you personal. Every time you were kind, it made me feel small. Kindness don't make nobody small, I said. It just shines a light on what we hide. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. He told me you stayed after his parents divorced, that you were the one who... She stopped, shaking her head. He said you were his only real home. I looked down at my hands. He was just a child. All he needed was someone to tell him he mattered. She stared at me, voice barely there. Do you hate me? I smiled faintly. No, baby, hate takes too much energy. Besides, you're family now, whether you like it or not. That pulled a shaky laugh out of her. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. How do you do that? How do you make everything sound like grace? Because I done lived long enough to know folks hurt others when they don't know how to heal themselves. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the space between her breaths. Finally, she whispered, I want you to stay. Not as help, just stay. I reached across the table and took her hand. It trembled, but she didn't pull away. Let's start with respect, child. The rest'll come when it's ready. She nodded, tears spilling again, but this time they were clean. Upstairs, the baby cried, small and sudden, like he'd been listening too. I stood. Let me go settle him. Tasia rose too. No, she said, then smiled weakly. No, I'll come with you. We walked up together, step by slow step. In the nursery, moonlight poured across the crib. Little Noah blinked up at us, wide-eyed and calm, his tiny hand reaching. Tasia leaned over, whispering, He really does look like Marcus. Same heart too, I said. She looked at me, eyes soft now. I can see why he loves you. I smiled, brushing the baby's cheek. Love don't fade just 'cause life changes its name. For the first time since I'd met her, she smiled without armor. Small, real. The kind that tells you healing's finally found its way in. We stood there a while, two women from different worlds breathing in the same quiet. And I thought, maybe this was what grace looked like, not a grand gesture, just the small mercy of being seen. When I finally went home before dawn, the street smelled like wet grass again, same as it had years ago when I first carried that boy's secrets on my back. Only now, it didn't feel like burden. It felt like purpose. By Monday, the whole street seemed to hum with whispers. Neighbors always pretend they don't notice what goes on behind tall gates, but word travels faster than perfume. I could feel it every time I went to the market, those sideways glances, the small smiles that said, "We heard." Marcus called me the next morning. "Stay home today," he said. "Tasha's mother's coming, and my mama's on a flight. I don't want you caught in the middle. I laughed softly. Baby, I've been in the middle since before you could spell the word. He sighed. Just promise me you won't let them upset you. I don't let people upset me, I said. They just show me who they are. That afternoon, clouds gathered thick and low. By evening, the house was lit with a yellow kind of stormlight, bright but uneasy. I'd come anyway. Tasia had asked me to. Her voice on the phone had been careful, softer than before. If you're willing, she said, I could use your help with dinner. When I arrived, she opened the door herself. No makeup, no silk robe, just jeans and a sweater. The sight alone told me something had shifted. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Storm or no storm, child, I keep my promises. We worked side by side in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, the sound of knives soft against the cutting board. She kept glancing toward the window. They'll both be here soon, she murmured. My mother and his. Best keep the soup warm, I said. Cold food makes for colder words. She smiled faintly at that. The first car to pull up belonged to Mrs. Jerome. I recognized the sound of it before I saw her, a sleek foreign thing that hummed like it thought too highly of itself. She stepped out wrapped in beige cashmere, pearls still perfect, eyes still sharp enough to cut glass. Mother, Marcus said as he opened the door. She kissed the air near his cheek. Marcus, darling, you look exhausted. Her gaze drifted past him into the foyer and found me. For a moment her smile froze. Ora Mae. Evening, ma'am. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. I didn't realize you were still in service. I'm in grace, I said softly. But yes, I help where I'm needed. That earned a faint snort before she swept inside. Tasia's mother arrived minutes later, smelling of gardenias and judgment. The two women exchanged polite daggers disguised as compliments, and soon the air in that pretty house felt thick enough to chew. Dinner was quiet at first, too quiet. Forks clinked, rain tapped the windows, thunder rolled far away. Then Mrs. Jerome spoke. I understand there was some confusion at your last gathering. Tasia's hand tightened on her glass. There was a misunderstanding that's been resolved. Mrs. Jerome looked straight at me. I should hope so. I'd hate for the past to intrude on Marcus's professional life. Marcus set down his fork. Mother. She waved a manicured hand. You know how people talk. They love a scandal. Her gaze returned to me. I thought you'd moved on, Ora Mae. We gave you a generous severance. The words hit me like a chill draft, but I just smiled. Yes, ma'am. Money pays bills, not memory. Her lips pressed thin. Well, memory can be inconvenient. Before Marcus could speak, Tasia's mother leaned forward. All this over a nanny? Really, darling, you both need thicker skin. Help is replaceable. The table went silent. I folded my napkin, slow and steady. Ma'am, I said, help may be replaceable, but care ain't. You can pay a person to show up, but not to love your child. Mrs. Jerome's face reddened. That's quite enough. Marcus pushed his chair back. No, Mama, it's not enough. You let her raise me, then treated her like she was furniture. I won't sit quiet for that again. The storm outside cracked loud, lightning flashing across the glass. Mrs. Jerome's voice trembled for the first time. You're embarrassing yourself. No, he said, I'm remembering myself. Tasia reached for his hand under the table. Let him speak, she whispered. He looked at me then, eyes steady. She gave me everything you didn't have time for. You owe her more than a severance check, and so do I. Mrs. Jerome stood abruptly. I will not be scolded in my son's house. Then maybe listen instead, I said gently. Listening costs less than pride. The room went still again, except for the storm rattling the windows. Mrs. Jerome's eyes glistened, not with tears yet, but close. You always did know how to talk in riddles, she said. Maybe that's 'cause truth sounds softer that way. She looked away, breathing shallow, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw a flicker of something human under all that polish. The storm calmed, but the air inside that house stayed heavy. The thunder had spent itself, leaving only the soft patter of rain and the weight of words that couldn't be unsaid. Mrs. Jerome stood near the window, arms wrapped around herself. Tasha's mother looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening, her eyes darting between me and the door. Marcus poured a bit of water into his glass, hands still shaking. "Mama," he said quietly, "you don't have to understand everything tonight. Just stop pretending she didn't matter." His mother turned from the window. The pearls at her throat gleamed like armor. "She was hired help, Marcus. We paid her well." "Yes," he said, "but you didn't pay her to love me, and she did anyway." That sentence hung in the air, simple and sharp. Mrs. Jerome looked down at her manicured hands, the polish catching the candlelight. For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. Tashia's mother cleared her throat. "I think perhaps we should." "No," I said gently. "Let it breathe." Every eye turned to me. I felt the moment settle like warm air before a sunrise. "I ain't here to embarrass nobody," I said. "I just want peace. But peace don't come if truth keeps getting covered up like dust under a rug." Mrs. Jerome's shoulders slumped a little. "You were good with him," she murmured. "I'll give you that." "Good was never the point," I said. "He needed somebody to listen. That's all I did." Marcus reached for my hand across the table, rough palm against mine. "You did more than that," he whispered. Tashia looked at her husband, then at me. "She taught you how to be gentle," she said, half smiling through tears. "I see it now." The rain outside softened to a hush. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mrs. Jerome drew a shaky breath and said, "You should have been treated better, Ora Mae. I can't change what's past, but I can say that." I nodded. "That's enough." It wasn't an apology wrapped in roses, but it was real, and that was worth more. Tashia's mother looked at her daughter, pride bending a little at last. "Seems your husband chose wisely after all." Tashia smiled faintly. "He chose truth. The rest we'll figure out." The tension cracked then, not with laughter, but with something softer. Relief. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, breathing like a man finally allowed to rest. Mrs. Jerome moved toward me, hesitating as if unsure whether to offer a handshake or something more. I stood, saved her the trouble, and wrapped my arms around her. She stiffened first, then relaxed, just barely. "You always did hug too long," she muttered, voice thick. "Maybe that's why folks remember," I said, and she let out a small, watery laugh. When she left a little later, she stopped in the doorway and looked back. "You'll always have a place at this family's table, Ora Mae." "Tables are for eating," I said. "Hearts are for belonging. I'm happy with either." After the door closed, Marcus sank into the couch, rubbing his face. I didn't think she'd listen. "She did," I said. "She just needed someone brave enough to speak." Tashia turned to me. "You could have shamed us in front of everyone, but you didn't. Why?" "Because shame don't fix pride," I said. "Only grace does." She smiled through her tears. "Then I've got a lot to learn from you." "You already learning," I said. "Lesson 1, humility looks good on you." That made her laugh, soft and tired, the kind of laugh that means a wall has finally come down. We spent the rest of the evening cleaning together. No orders, no roles. Just 3 people moving around a quiet house while the rain washed the world outside clean. By the time I stepped out to leave, the clouds had lifted. The street glistened under the lamplight, and the air smelled new again. Marcus followed me to the porch. "You'll come back tomorrow?" he asked. "If the Lord's willing," I said. "You and your wife still got growing to do." He smiled, that same crooked smile from when he was 10. "I'll make breakfast, like old times." I chuckled. "If you burn the grits again, I'm telling on you." He laughed, full and real, and for the first time in years, the sound carried no guilt in it, just peace. 3 months passed before I went back to that house. Spring had stretched itself across Atlanta, dogwoods blooming, air thick with the promise of rain. Life had gone quiet again, the good kind of quiet that means things are growing. When I walked up the path, the front door was open, curtains dancing in the breeze. Tashia's laughter drifted out, softer now, unforced. She stood in the kitchen with Marcus, flour on her cheek, a pie half finished on the counter. The baby clapped in his high chair, powdered sugar dusting his curls. Marcus looked up first. "There she is," he said, smiling wide. "Miss May." I waved my hand. "Ora Mae'll do fine, baby." He hugged me anyway, the kind of hug that says home. Tasha joined in, shy at first, then tighter. "We kept your rocking chair by the window," she said. "It felt wrong without you." I looked, and there it was, the same old chair, polished, a new cushion sewn from green fabric with gold thread. The sight of it nearly split me open. "You didn't have to do all that." "We wanted to," Marcus said. "We wanted you to know you belong here." I sat down, the wood creaking like it remembered me. Noah toddled over on chubby legs and pressed a sticky cookie into my hand. "Gamma May," he said proudly. My heart gave out a laugh and a tear at the same time. "Lord, you talking already?" Tasha smiled. "He says it every morning." The afternoon passed easy. We talked, cooked, told stories. Tasha asked questions about Marcus as a boy, how he used to sneak cookies before dinner, how he once built a fort out of laundry baskets and called it his office. She listened like someone collecting pieces of a puzzle she finally wanted to see whole. When the pie came out of the oven, she cut the first slice and handed it to me. "For teaching us both what love looks like," she said. I didn't know what to say, so I just took a bite and let the sweetness do the talking. As the sun slipped low, we all moved to the porch. The light turned everything gold, the baby's hair, the trees, even the porch steps. Marcus played that same old tune on the piano inside, notes drifting through the open window. I closed my eyes, and for a moment time, folded again. The boy he was, the man he'd become, the circle God had drawn between us. Tasha leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a quiet smile on her lips. "You were right," she said. "Grace fixes more than shame ever could." I nodded. "Grace don't fix the past, sugar. It just gives it a softer edge." She reached over, squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us." "I never gave up," I said. "I just waited for y'all to catch up." The baby squealed at a passing firefly, Marcus laughed, and the world felt right again. As twilight deepened, I rocked slow in that chair, letting the sound of their voices wash over me. The porch light flickered on, moths already dancing around it. I thought about every door I'd cleaned, every floor I'd polished, every child I'd ever loved and let go. Each one had led me here. Some stories don't end with a grand goodbye. Some just settle quiet in your bones until peace shows up and takes a seat beside you. This was one of those. I looked at the camera in my mind, the way I always do when I tell y'all a story, and smiled. "You see," I said softly, "sometimes life puts you in rooms where folks don't know your worth. Don't you worry none. Truth has a way of remembering your name." I rocked once more, the chair creaking like an old friend. "I tell real stories like this one," I whispered. "If you want to hear more, subscribe to Tales of Ora Mae. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place?"